We are back live here on the Quad Pod. We have a tremendous guest with us today. He joins us live here in our broadcast. Paul Letersky is with us. Paul is amazing, and he has written an incredible book. He's a former FBI agent. He has been involved in all sorts of different things, and the J. Edgar Hoover administration is a big part of where he focuses his book on. Paul, welcome to the Quad Pod. How are you, sir?
Just fine yourself, and thank you for having me on.
Now, you have a tremendous book here. This is absolutely amazing. It's about your time with J. Edgar Hoover. Why is it that something like this, it took you something like this to write something like this? Because not a lot of people have written books about that administration from the inside details like you're doing.
Well, actually, I'm the only person that was on Hoover's personal staff that has written a book. But to answer your question, I started writing it about 5 or 6 years ago as I was recognizing how history is repeating itself. I mean, very closely repeating itself from the time I worked for Hoover. And when I worked for Hoover was in the 1960s and 70s, probably the most turbulent time in our United States history. Jigger, before you were born, Jigger. Or you're James, right?
Yes. Well, let's talk about this book. Why did you decide at this time to bring this book out and get this out there for everybody?
Right. I kind of interrupted myself. So anyway, I saw history repeating itself, and I thought it would be a good time to bring everything out and show some history that has changed from a lot of history books, because I was on the inside with telephone conversations and memos of historic things that were going on, and they were either misreported or mistaken, or the translation in history was in error. And I wanted to make sure I'm not a historian, but I've revised a little history to bring about the truth. And that's why I started writing, because you can really see history repeating itself. But in addition to that, I have very small grandchildren, and I've led a pretty adventuresome life, and I wanted my grandchildren to know what their grandpa had done, and they were too small for me to tell them my story. And so I thought, well, I'd write the book and bring in the historical part of it, and a lot of personal stuff and some true crime.
Fantastic.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
No. You answered in spades, my friend. We have got a great guest with us today. FBI Special Agent, the former FBI Special Agent, Paul Letersky, is with us today.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem. You're a busy guy. He's out promoting his forthcoming book, which is out as of Tuesday, Behind the Scenes Look into the Office of J. Edgar Hoover. It's the first ever written by a member of his personal staff, the director. My years assisting J. Edgar Hoover. And he joins us today here on the Quad Pod talking about this incredible book. So tell me about the animosity that was felt by Hoover towards Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and some of the comments made by Hoover on the first hearing of Dr. King's shooting. Tell us about this.
I don't think there was any animosity from Hoover, and I think where it comes from is that at one time Hoover called, and just one time, he called Martin Luther King the most notorious liar in the United States. So that indicates animosity for sure. And the reason he did that is because King accused the FBI of having all Southern-born agents in Georgia. And, and the Bureau wouldn't investigate the cases on civil rights violations and what have you. And that just simply wasn't true. Most of the agents in Georgia were from the Northeast. And the FBI to Hoover was his wife, his mistress, his child, his family, his whole life. And he was a workaholic, and he would take work home with him every night. And then in the morning, I'd get stuff out of his briefcase that had notations all over it. So, he kept working. But going back to the Martin Luther King issue, uh, that was the only close to animosity that there was. He was just upset about it. But the reason everyone believes that Hoover and he had a real problem was because uh, Martin Luther King had two people that were his senior advisors that were card-carrying communists, and
Wow.
Hoover absolutely was fighting communism was his passion from the 1940s, in the 50s and the 60s, and this was in the 60s, and so the FBI wiretapped his phones, bugged his hotel room, but it wasn't uh, just an arbitrary type of thing. Bobby Kennedy was the attorney general at the time, and Bobby Kennedy and his brother JFK both recognized that Stephen Levin, one of the communists, uh, not only was a top advisor, but was writing several of Martin Luther King's speeches.
Wow.
And the thought was, from a national security standpoint, that these active Communist Party members were trying to recruit the large following that Martin Luther King had. And that was the reason for the wiretaps. And Bobby Kennedy authorized those wiretaps when he was the Attorney General.
That's
I'm
amazing.
getting
That is amazing. We have got a great guest with us today. Paul Letersky is with us. He is a former FBI special agent. He is discussing his incredible book. It was released this last week, and a behind-the-scenes look into the office of J. Edgar Hoover, the first ever written by a member of his personal staff. It's called The Director. And Paul joins us today here on Skype talking a little bit about this incredible, incredible book. So, what are some of your goals for this book, Paul?
basic to sell a whole bunch of them. How's that?
Okay, well, that's good. That's good.
But I do want people to understand the history, understand the man. Want to make sure that my book's not interpreted as another Hoover biography, because there've been plenty of them.
Yes.
The book is really a memoir, and it's a memoir as to how Hoover was known to me. And I think I want the people to know what Hoover was like, in my opinion, the fact that I was with him every day, working for him, and being in his office. From a historic perspective, I want the story to be accurate. And I wasn't totally supportive of Hoover. I criticized the FBI where criticism was due. Uh, and I even criticized myself for some of the things I did as an FBI agent when we were working on counterintelligence programs, and we actually did violate people's civil rights. But it's all explained in the book on our counterintelligence program, and a little historic stuff from working for Hoover himself.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, take me through the writing process. Did you use an outline? Did you have notes? What was that like? What was the writing process like?
I'm sorry. Uh, I still use a legal pad, and
Awesome.
I
Awesome.
write things out in longhand before I type them, because I don't want to be staring in front of the screen while I'm typing stuff, and I can just uh, keep my thoughts straight while I'm writing. And so what I would do is, I had a lot of memorabilia from Mr. Hoover's office. Like Christmas cards from him, notes from uh, Helen Gandy, who was his assistant administrator,
Yeah.
and she was with him his entire career. And I've got an entire uh, chapter on Helen Gandy.
Awesome.
Everybody called her Miss Gandy. No one called her Helen. And she started working for Hoover the same time that he started in the Department of Justice, which was before he was a director. They both worked in the Department of Justice. It was in 1918 when she started working for him. She was still working for him when he died in 1972. And a few
Wow.
weeks after that, too, shredding his secret files, if you will. Uh, so uh, she's just an interesting lady, a very powerful person. J. Edgar Hoover would not be J. Edgar Hoover but for Helen Gandy, or Miss Gandy, as we all called her. I developed a real good relationship with her, and I miss her even to this day. She died in 1988, but she was 69 years old when I walked into
Wow.
Mr. Hoover's office, and I was 23. I was going to night school, to law school at night, and working for Hoover during the day. So
That's
I,
pretty
I was
phenomenal.
pretty young fella at the time. And stop me if I'm rambling on
No,
and
no,
you
no,
have.
no. This is all great information. You're amazing, my friend. Keep going. Keep going.
And I think what everybody should know is how formal Hoover really was in everything he did. Uh, and he ran the office and he ran the FBI in a very formal, disciplined manner. And all the rules were his. That was for certain. And you better abide by those rules because you signed on to them when you came on board.
Yes.
Uh, and to give you an idea of how formal the office was, I I didn't meet Mr. Hoover until the first day I started working for him. He didn't interview me for the position. He had assistant directors interview people for the position in his office. And if I screwed up and got fired, there was a couple of assistant directors that would have probably ended their career in Butte, Montana, uh, because they would have been responsible for me. And so when I first met him, he called me into his office. I had a direct line to his office
Yeah.
from mine. He called me into the office and he started the introduction and finished it at the same time in a very staccato uh, speaking voice. And he said, Mr. Letersky, I want to welcome you to my personal office staff. You should have been briefed on what your duties are, so there's no sense in you and I wasting our time going over your responsibilities. I only want you to know one thing, and one thing only. In my office, I allow no margin for error. Now go to work. That was my introduction to him. And my part of the conversation consisted of yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, more yes-sirs than no, sirs. And later on with Miss Gandy, because he called me Mr. Hoover, Mr. Letersky, to give you some idea of how formal things were there. And I asked Miss Gandy one day, I said, Mr. Hoover he always calls me Mr. Letersky, and I would wish that some Monday morning he would say to me, hey, Paul, how was your weekend? Never happened. You know why? He could care less how my weekend was.
That's
And
awesome.
Miss Gandy said to me, hey, just get used to it. That's the way he is. And wait till you hear this. She said, I've worked for him for over 50 years, and he's never called me Helen.
That's
Can you
awesome.
believe? Can you believe that? And that's true, and that's the truth. Uh,
He was a real professional guy. It seems.
he really was. Everything was just so disciplined, uh, and he ran the bureau that way, and the agents were that way as well. You wouldn't have uh, a suit coat that didn't match the pants. You'd have a necktie that would have to match your outfit. and everything was, and when you looked at him, he was such a dapper, satirical pleasure type of dresser that even his slacks, his pants, his suit pants, had a sharp crease in them that you could probably cut anything with. It was like creases put there by God. And then I'd stand next to him and I'd look at my suit and my pants were all baggy. I thought I took them to the cleaners, but it was just unbelievable as to how precise he was in everything.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. We've got Paul Letersky with us today. He's got a brand new book, The Director. He's with us today here on our big broadcast here on the Quad Pod. So talk to me about J. Edgar Hoover and the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, of course, that goes back a way. And Hoover instituted a program called Counter Intel Pro, or Count.
Yes.
It was an acronym for counterintelligence. And basically what it was is entering what we called or identified as subversive groups. But that counterintelligence program started with infiltrating the Communist Party in America. And then the Bureau entered the Ku Klux Klan, recruited Klansmen to become informants. We used psychological warfare about them, making Klan members think the other Klan member was an informant for the FBI, everything to disrupt the organization.
Yes.
And a lot of civil rights violations by the Klan were proven by the FBI's program, and a lot of Klans members went to prison as a result of it. And then that program continued till the time that I was there. Only we had different targets. Basically, the targets we had were subversive organizations and domestic terrorist organizations like the Weathermen. They were the violent faction of the Students for a Democratic Society.
Yeah.
And we would do the same things against them, to infiltrate them, to disrupt their operation, because the founders, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, they wanted to join with the Black Liberation Army and the Black Panthers to form a white fighting organization, but they wanted to have black organizations in with them to overthrow the United States government.
Wow.
They actually declared war on America in order to establish a classless society, meaning communism.
Absolutely amazing. Well, Paul, I appreciate you taking as much time as you have with us today to discuss this book. Where can we get the book, and how do we get involved with what you're doing, my friend?
The book is available at bookstores everywhere, Amazon, my website, which is paulletersky.com, and you can keep up with me on the website. We keep updating what is going on, and I guess you can get that book just about anywhere right now.
Fantastic. Well, Paul, you have been a tremendous guest. This has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you for joining me today here on our program, and thanks for doing this, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, well, listen, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. Good luck with all your media stuff today, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, whenever you want to call me, go ahead.
I will. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
We'll pick up from where we left off.
Definitely. Have yourself a wonderful day, my friend. Thank you.
You have a good day yourself.
There he goes, Paul Letersky. He is amazing. That is this week's Quad Pod, and we will see you next week here on our big program.